Some prisons don't have walls. Some chains leave no marks. And some predators wear the face of everything you ever wanted. What I'm about to tell you actually happened. Every detail is real. Only the names have been changed. And by the time you hear the end, you'll understand why this man begged me to share his nightmare with the world. He doesn't want your sympathy. He wants to save your life. Here's what haunts me most about his story. It's not the cruelty she inflicted. It's how long he stood inside the fire without feeling the flames. It's how a confident, intelligent, successful man got dismantled piece by piece, and never saw it coming. His name is Daniel. At 34, he had everything working. A thriving finance career. An apartment with his name on the deed. Friends who showed up. Parents who called every Sunday. He wasn't scrolling dating apps at 2 a.m. out of desperation. He wasn't looking for someone to rescue him from loneliness. He was simply open, ready, hopeful. That part matters more than anything else I'll tell you. Daniel wasn't fragile. He wasn't naive. He wasn't the kind of guy you'd look at and think victim. He walked through life with his shoulders back and his eyes clear. He trusted himself. He knew what he brought to the table. And that's exactly why this story should terrify you. Because Daniel did everything right. He wasn't reckless with his heart. He wasn't chasing red flags because they felt exciting. He was a grown man with good judgment and solid instincts. None of it protected him. She walked through every defense he had like they were made of smoke. She found the cracks he didn't know existed. She studied him like a textbook and became exactly what he needed to see. 4 years later, he barely recognized his own reflection. His career was in ruins. His friendships had evaporated. His family felt like strangers. His health had collapsed. And the confident man who once knew his worth? Gone. Erased so completely he wondered if that version of himself had ever really existed. This isn't a story about a weak man who made obvious mistakes. This is a story about how invisible destruction actually works. How someone can steal your entire life while you're standing right there watching. How the trap closes so slowly you don't feel it until you're already suffocating. Daniel survived. Barely. And now he wants you to see what he couldn't. The warning signs that looked like love. The tactics that felt like connection. The patterns that seem obvious from the outside but become completely invisible once you're inside them. If you think this couldn't happen to you, that's exactly what Daniel believed. He was wrong. And if you don't learn from his destruction, you might be wrong too. She didn't just enter his world. She consumed it. With a smile that stopped rooms cold and focus that made him forget other people existed. The first time Daniel saw her, something shifted in his chest. She wasn't just attractive. She was magnetic in a way that felt almost supernatural. People gravitated toward her without understanding why. When she laughed, strangers turned to look. When she spoke, everyone leaned closer. But here's what hooked Daniel completely. When she turned that spotlight on him, everything else disappeared. Suddenly he was the only person in any room they shared. Her questions weren't small talk. They were excavations. She wanted to know about his childhood fears. His secret ambitions. The dreams he'd never spoken aloud. She remembered everything. Every throwaway comment became ammunition for later conversations. Nobody had ever made him feel so completely known. Their early dates felt like discovering electricity. Hours vanished without notice. Conversations went places he'd never gone with anyone. She matched his intelligence word for word. She challenged him in ways that felt exhilarating instead of exhausting. Daniel thought he'd found something rare. Someone rare. What he couldn't see yet was the performance behind the perfection. She revealed her own pain strategically. Stories of men who'd abandoned her. Relationships where she'd given everything and received betrayal. A childhood marked by wounds she'd somehow transcended. Every confession made Daniel feel protective. Every vulnerability made him feel chosen. He would be different. He would be the one who finally loved her correctly. That belief became his blindfold. 3 weeks after their first date, she looked into his eyes and said those 3 words. Daniel felt his heart crack open. This was fate. This was destiny. This was everything he'd been waiting for without knowing it. 2 months in, she started mentioning forever. Engagement. Marriage. Building a life. When you know something's right, why waste time questioning it? His friends raised eyebrows. His parents exchanged concerned glances. His mother pulled him aside and said something felt rushed. Something felt off. She couldn't name it precisely. But mothers sense things logic can't explain. Daniel dismissed every warning. She had explanations for all of it. His friends were jealous of what he'd found. His family didn't understand real connection. They wanted him to settle for ordinary love. Why would he listen to people who'd never experienced anything this powerful? One by one, she reframed every person who cared about him as an obstacle. And Daniel, drowning in what felt like the romance of his lifetime, chose her perspective over theirs. He proposed after 16 weeks together. They married 3 months after that. Standing at that altar, Daniel believed he was beginning the greatest chapter of his life. He had no idea he was signing his own death certificate. The cage wasn't built in a single day. It was constructed one question at a time, one accusation at a time, one surrender at a time, until the man who walked in ceased to exist. Nothing changed overnight. That's the sinister genius of what happened. The shift was so gradual Daniel couldn't identify when things went wrong. There was no dramatic moment, no obvious turning point, just a slow poisoning he mistook for normal marriage adjustment. It started with curiosity that felt flattering. Where were you this afternoon? Who just sent that message? Why did your meeting run 20 minutes late? Daniel actually smiled at first. She cares about my day. She wants to stay connected. This is what love looks like. Then curiosity evolved into something darker. Questions became interrogations. Interest became surveillance. If he arrived home slightly late, she demanded a complete accounting of every minute. If a woman's name appeared on his phone, she required full access to every exchange they'd ever had. I just need to feel safe with you. If there's nothing to hide, why does my asking bother you so much? That logic sounded reasonable enough. So Daniel started preemptively reporting his movements. He texted updates before she could ask. Not from affection. From the growing understanding that silence created consequences he didn't want to face. He stopped grabbing coffee with female co-workers. He declined invitations from old friends. His world grew smaller by the week. But the shrinking happened so gradually he interpreted it as maturity. He was prioritizing his marriage, being a devoted husband, making responsible choices. Then came the first explosion. Daniel forgot to mention a routine company dinner. Nothing secretive, nothing suspicious, just an oversight. When she discovered it, something inside her shattered. For 90 minutes she screamed without pause. Words designed to slice through bone. Accusations of infidelity. Claims he'd never truly loved her. Questions about every woman he'd ever known. Objects flew across the room. Not directly at him. Close enough to make him flinch. Daniel stood frozen. Paralyzed. This woman was unrecognizable. This wasn't the person he'd married. Then the storm vanished as suddenly as it appeared. Rage dissolved into sobbing. Accusations became desperate apologies. I don't know what happened to me. I was just so terrified of losing you. Please don't give up on us. I promise this will never happen again. Daniel held her, comforted her, chose forgiveness because she seemed genuinely shattered by her own behavior. He didn't realize he'd just completed the first rotation of a cycle that would repeat endlessly. Explosion, tears, promises, honeymoon, tension building, explosion. Each time he forgave her, the next eruption grew more severe. Each time she promised change, the promise meant less. The trap had teeth now, and they were sinking deeper with every rotation. She didn't lock him away from everyone he loved. She simply made loving anyone except her more painful than the emptiness of having only her. The isolation was surgical, precise, methodical, and completely invisible while it was happening. Daniel never felt like he was being cut off. He felt like he was making reasonable choices, prioritizing his marriage, being a good partner, doing what adults do when they commit to someone. But the pattern was deliberate. Every single move calculated. His friends became problems first. She found flaws in each of them. This one disrespected their relationship. That one was a negative influence. Another one clearly wanted Daniel to fail. Why do you even need them when you have me? After seeing friends, she'd grow cold for days. Not angry exactly. Just distant. Withdrawn. Punishing him with silence he couldn't quite name as punishment. The message was clear without ever being spoken. Choosing them means losing me. One by one, Daniel stopped reaching out. Stopped returning calls. Stopped showing up. It was simply easier than managing her response when he did. His parents became targets next. She manufactured conflicts before every family gathering. His mother had made some comment. His father had given her a look. Someone had disrespected her in some vague way she couldn't quite specify but deeply felt. By the time they'd arrive anywhere, she'd already be wounded. Daniel would spend entire visits managing her emotions instead of connecting with people who'd loved him his entire life. Eventually he started making excuses not to go at all. His mother sensed something was breaking. She tried reaching out. Left voicemails Daniel never returned. Sent messages he read but couldn't answer honestly. He defended his wife instead. Made excuses for behavior he couldn't explain. Convinced himself his mother was overreacting. Being dramatic. Not understanding how relationships work. The distance grew into a canyon. Here's what nobody tells you about isolation. You don't notice it until crisis arrives. You don't realize how alone you've become until you desperately need someone and discover every lifeline has been severed. Daniel had become an island without recognizing the water rising around him. 2 years into the marriage, his entire support system had vanished. Old friends had stopped trying. Family had pulled back. Co-workers kept professional distance. The only voice in his life was hers, which was precisely the architecture she'd been building from the beginning. No witnesses. No outside perspectives. No one to say this isn't normal. No one to confirm his reality when she twisted it beyond recognition. Just Daniel and the woman who claimed to love him more than anyone ever had. Alone in a prison he'd helped construct without understanding he was laying the bricks. The trap was complete now. The door had closed silently behind him, and he still had no idea he was even captured. He didn't lose himself overnight. He was erased in increments. So small he never noticed until he looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize the ghost staring back. As his world shrank, her behavior expanded. The eruptions came more frequently now. What once happened monthly became weekly. What was weekly became almost daily. The woman he married had fully disappeared. Something else had taken her place. Daniel developed a ritual before entering his own home. He'd sit in his parked car for 10 minutes. Sometimes 15. Breathing. Preparing. Trying to predict which version awaited him inside. Would tonight bring rage or silence? Accusations or affection? He never knew until he turned the key. The surveillance intensified beyond anything reasonable. She tracked his location constantly through his phone. Read every email before he did. Appeared unannounced at his office for surprise visits that felt like inspections. Every movement monitored. Every moment accounted for. Every interaction scrutinized for evidence of betrayal that didn't exist. The accusations of infidelity became relentless. Daniel had never been unfaithful. Never considered it. Never gave her genuine reason for suspicion. None of that mattered. She constructed elaborate conspiracy theories from nothing. A coworker's name mentioned casually became proof of an affair. A receipt from an unfamiliar restaurant became evidence of secret meetings. Her mind manufactured betrayal from thin air. Then punished him for crimes he'd never committed. Physical intimidation entered the equation gradually. She never struck him directly. Not quite. But objects flew regularly. Possessions shattered against walls. She'd position herself inches from his face screaming, "Shove him." Blocked doorways preventing escape. Once she locked him outside at 2 in the morning, wearing only underwear. Because she'd convinced herself his phone contained secrets he refused to reveal. Daniel could have overpowered her physically without effort. But what then? Push back and become the aggressor? Call police and face their skepticism? She understood exactly where the legal line was. Pushed right to the edge without technically crossing it. If he ever restrained her even defensively, she'd scream that he was the abuser. The threat was never spoken but perfectly clear. If this ever became public, she'd be the victim. He'd be the monster. Society had already written that script. Daniel's work performance collapsed under the weight. Concentration became impossible. He was perpetually exhausted, constantly checking his phone, forever bracing for the next explosion. Colleagues noticed something wrong, but nobody asked. Men don't discuss these things. His body started failing too. Sleep vanished. Weight dropped dramatically. A permanent knot lived in his stomach that never unwound. The confident, successful man had been hollowed out completely. Nothing remained but a shell performing the motions of living. The worst part, Daniel says, was forgetting who he used to be. That earlier version of himself seemed like a stranger now. Someone from a life that might have been imagined. He didn't escape because he suddenly became brave. He escaped because he finally understood that staying meant dying. The breaking point arrived without fanfare. No dramatic revelation. No sudden awakening. Just pure exhaustion finally reaching its limit. 3 consecutive days of accusations. 72 hours of screaming. Objects shattering against walls. 0 sleep. 0 peace. 0 moments where he could breathe without fear. When it finally paused, Daniel stumbled into the bathroom, gripped the sink, forced himself to look in the mirror. The man staring back was unrecognizable. Hollow eyes sunken into a gaunt face. Skin gray like something already dead. Bones visible where muscle used to be. He looked like a corpse that hadn't stopped moving yet. A single thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. If I stay here, I will actually die. Not metaphorically. Not dramatically. Literally. Whatever remained of the original Daniel would cease to exist entirely. The destruction would become permanent. Complete. Irreversible. He walked out of that bathroom and spoke 5 words. I want a divorce. He prepared for rage. Braced for the worst explosion yet. Every muscle tensed for impact. What came instead was infinitely more terrifying. She didn't accept his decision. Didn't grieve. Didn't negotiate. Didn't release him. She declared absolute war. Threats came first. If he left, she would destroy everything. Tell everyone he was abusive. Ensure no one would ever believe his truth. Make certain his reputation never recovered. Then threats became action. She contacted his employer with vague accusations. Nothing specific enough for legal consequences. Just enough to create suspicion and discomfort. His company suggested he take leave until things settled. Career momentum he built for a decade evaporated overnight. She reached out to his estranged friends and family. Spun elaborate narratives about his behavior. Positioned herself as the victim fleeing a dangerous man. Some believed her completely. Others didn't know what to believe. The support system he'd already lost became even more unreachable. The harassment was relentless and calculated. She appeared everywhere he went. Sat in her car outside his new apartment for hours. Sent dozens of messages daily. Rage alternating with desperate pleading. Threats mixed with promises of change. Daniel considered involving police. But he understood the reality. A man claiming harassment by a woman faced immediate skepticism. If she counterclaimed he was stalking her, who would officers believe? The system wasn't designed to protect someone like him. Restraining orders required evidence of physical threat. Psychological terrorism didn't qualify. He was told to document everything. But documentation doesn't stop someone from burning down your life while you're collecting evidence. Eventually the storm passed. She found another target. Another man walking unknowingly into the same invisible prison. Daniel heard she'd moved on within months. Repeating identical patterns with someone new. He felt genuine sorrow for the next victim. And overwhelming relief that he'd finally escaped alive. Some wounds heal completely. Some leave scars you carry forever. And some change you so fundamentally that the person you were simply stops existing. Daniel relocated to a different city. Started over with nothing but wreckage behind him. The rebuilding process was slower than he ever imagined possible. He reached out to his parents first. Those conversations were painful. Years of distance and defensive lies had created damage that couldn't be undone overnight. His mother cried when she finally heard the truth. His father sat in silence, struggling to process what his son had endured. The relationships survived but never fully recovered their original depth. Too much time had been lost. Too many walls had been built. Some things break in ways that glue can't fix. He attempted new friendships cautiously. Kept everyone at arm's length instinctively. Trust had become a foreign language he'd forgotten how to speak. Therapy helped him understand the architecture of what happened. Why he'd stayed so long. How the manipulation worked. What warning signs he'd missed completely. Knowledge brought clarity but not complete healing. Certain damage proved permanent. Daniel still wakes from nightmares sometimes. Dreams where she's found him again. Dreams where escape was only temporary. He jolts awake with his heart pounding. Sheets soaked with sweat. Reality taking several minutes to reassemble itself. He still flinches when his phone buzzes unexpectedly. Still feels panic spike when any woman raises her voice nearby. His body learned fear so deeply it became automatic. Reflexive. Beyond conscious control. His therapist explained this is normal. Trauma doesn't just live in memories. It inhabits muscle and bone. Recovery isn't a straight line pointing upward. Some wounds may never fully close. Daniel is 43 now. Nearly a decade has passed since he escaped. He hasn't had a serious relationship since. He's dated occasionally. But whenever connection begins feeling close, something inside him pulls away. The fear isn't about her specifically anymore. It's about what intimacy can become. How wrong his judgment was. How easily he could miss the signs again. He's made peace with possibly remaining alone forever. That's not the life he imagined at 34. Not the future he saw when he stood at that altar believing he'd found everything. But solitude feels safer than the alternative. He functions well enough. Works steadily. Maintains surface friendships. Appears normal to anyone watching casually. Inside though, something essential remains missing. A capacity for complete trust that may never regenerate. An openness to love that was burned out of him systematically. Daniel survived when others don't. He escaped when many stay trapped forever. He rebuilt something resembling a life from absolute destruction. But survival and thriving are different things entirely. The man he used to be died in that apartment. Someone else walks around wearing his face now. Functional but fundamentally altered. Alive but not entirely whole. Nobody talks about what I'm about to say. We discuss abusive relationships constantly. But we imagine a specific picture every time. A violent man using his fists. A woman too scared to run. That picture exists. That picture matters deeply. But it's not the only picture that destroys lives. Men become victims too. Abuse wears invisible forms. Control operates without leaving visible evidence. Manipulation happens in frequencies only the target can hear. The terrifying reality is how normal everything appeared from outside. Daniel's neighbors saw a happy couple. His co-workers saw a tired man handling stress. Nobody suspected what happened behind that closed door. Because Daniel was too ashamed to reveal it. And she was too calculated to show her true face publicly. That's exactly how this kind of destruction operates. No bruises to photograph. No broken bones to document. No physical evidence whatsoever. Just a human being slowly erased while the world sees nothing unusual. The prison has no visible bars. The chains leave no marks. The victim often doesn't recognize their captivity until escape feels impossible. Daniel lost 4 years completely. His career trajectory shattered. His friendships dissolved permanently. His family connections fractured. His health collapsed. His ability to trust another human being was systematically dismantled. A decade later, he's still reconstructing the pieces. He's not alone in this experience. Men are watching right now who recognize fragments of his story. Men currently trapped who can't name what's happening. Men who escaped but still carry invisible wounds. If that's you, hear this clearly. Nothing about this was your fault. You're not weak for being deceived. You're not stupid for falling into the trap. You were specifically targeted by someone exceptionally skilled at destruction. Recognizing what's happening takes tremendous courage. Escaping takes even more. The shame belongs entirely to the person who did this. Not to you for being human enough to love. Intelligent, successful, capable people fall into these traps daily. That's precisely how the trap is designed. If you're watching this and recognize the patterns but aren't currently trapped, now you understand what to watch for. Now you know the most dangerous people often appear the most perfect initially. Now you know to trust your instincts when something feels wrong even without logical explanation. This isn't meant to create fear of all relationships. Love is real. Partnership is possible. Healthy, supportive people exist everywhere. But awareness protects you. Recognizing patterns protects you. Trusting your gut when it whispers warnings protects you. Daniel says if his story saves even one person from similar destruction, reliving his nightmare publicly was worth every painful moment. Pay attention to early warning signs. Trust your instincts completely. Never let anyone rush you into commitment before you're genuinely ready. The most dangerous predators wear the most beautiful masks. They have to. That's the only way the trap works. Protect yourself. Learn these patterns. Refuse to become another story like Daniel's. Love should expand your life, not demolish it. Intimacy should feel safe, not terrifying. Commitment should be freely chosen, not manipulated into existence. Daniel survived when many don't. Let his destruction become the warning that saves you from experiencing your own. If this story hit differently, you need to understand something deeper. The psychology behind why these predators choose their specific victims. That knowledge is where real protection begins. Subscribe now so you never miss what comes next. Share this with someone who needs to hear it before they learn these lessons the hard way. The next video reveals exactly how these people identify their targets, and why certain personality traits make some people more vulnerable than others. That knowledge could save your life, or save someone you love. Subscribe, share. Protect yourself and others, because nobody should ever have to live through what Daniel survived.